Let's make some fun lineups the Pacers can roll out this year and how they could be good or how they could maximize a new player or maximize a young player, why they'll matter for the Pacers this season in the lineup game on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Tuesday and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we're diving into some lineups, some fun lineups, some newer lineups, some new things that are possible for the Pacers this year, some getting information lineups, just lots of lineups, stuff that I want to see this season because I think it'll be fun, because I think it's a good way to maximize a new player or a young player that needs to be maximized, or lots of exploring, or how to put the Pacer stars all together in the best way possible. This is both about fun stuff that'll make me smile and go, ooh, that's cool, or stuff that I think the Pacers should try because it will help them learn something about someone new or learn something about someone they've had but now can maximize in different settings. The thing about this show is I do this every summer, right? I try to come up with fun lineups I'm looking forward to seeing and then look at them a few times during the season and see what matters. This year, it's a little different because they have like two new players. They largely ran it back. So it was harder at first in my head to come up with stuff. But once I really dove into this, I was like, oh, this is actually easier than I thought, between some Mathurin angles, some Jarris Walker stuff, some James Wiseman stuff, some big and some small. And we'll get to all of it right now. And let's start with the new guy, James Wiseman, and some stuff that he could do. What's the best way to play him, and what is the best way for the Pacers to succeed with him out there? So what worked with Detroit, because you go to James Wiseman's two-man pairings on NBA.com and you get a lot of gobbledygooky, what on earth is going on here? You know, the Pistons net ratings are all over the place, right? Like his best defensive rating combination was with Chimezie Metu. Am I supposed to learn anything from that? No. And that was 13 games of playing time. I can't learn anything from that. If you actually look at large sample stuff, what I wanted to figure out is, especially for the Pacers, who are really good on offense, what's the best way to make James Wiseman threatening on offense? What worked around him as a construct? And the best pairings, you'll be shocked to know, had featured players that could either create shots or shoot, right? Jaden Ivey was the second best offensive rating partner for Wiseman last year. He can create and kind of shoot, not really. Alec Burks was the best, and that sounds silly, but he actually shot it really well with Detroit last year. He was over 40% from deep before he got traded. He was over 40% with Detroit last year, right? That actually worked for the Pistons offensively. Cade Cunningham, Marcus Sasser, creators, those next two guys, right? The groups that didn't work with Wiseman from a two-man lineup combo were when he was with Chimezie Metu, or Evan Fournier, who couldn't shoot at all with Detroit, or Troy Brown Jr., who's never been a shooter, or Killian Hayes, who's never been much of anything, right? Clearly, shooting and creation are important. If you had made a thesis before I said who fit with James Wiseman, you would have come up with that type of player, right? But when you really dig into the data, you see that that's the case. And the defensive rating, it does not matter who he's with. It's all over the place in that reality. So the best way to maximize him is make sure the lineup can score and can keep up with any defensive shortcomings it may have, either from Wiseman or from the Pacers being a crummy defensive team. And so when you put players around James Wiseman, they should either be able to make him good and make the offense sing, or should be able to shoot around him so that if he is drawing attention or he is doing the stuff we talked about on the How James Wiseman Can Help episode last week, right, that everyone else can thrive. And so I wanted to start in two different places. One was, what does that look like if he's with the second unit, right? If he's primarily with guys that you could see a second unit looking like, right? So here's what I started with. Shooting at the 4, Obi Toppin's in, this is a bench group. Shooting on the wing, Ben Shepherd in there. A point guard who can get him lobs and create, TJ McConnell's in there. And then I need a 3, and I could opt for either. You could either go with the creation of Ben Mathurin or the shooting of Aaron Nesmith. And I know Nesmith's not a bench player, but you're going to have to mix and match. In the Pacers, you're going to mix and match all season. Nesmith would give them a good wing or a good backcourt defense for that group, which might make the most sense to be the best possible 5. But Mathurin might make the offense as good as possible, which might be the answer to the best possible Pacers 5. So that's one thing that I think will be interesting with Wiseman is especially the front court with Toppin. How do they play off of each other? Because that does seem a little bit complementary in offense. But in general, how can they make him click the best with the bench? Because if he's with, making this up, but, a Siakam and a Walker and not in a McConnell. It's like, okay, you're really counting on him, rolling and being an insane lob threat or just something going wrong with defensive communications, because there'd be a lot of space for him with that group, right? So you have to have the right amount of shooting or defense to get out in transition all over the floor. And that group kind of has both, right? McConnell can be the juiced up, run around his screens kind of guy. He can create for anybody from any angle. You have enough shooting, enough. It's not awesome, but enough with the Shepard, Neesmith, Toppin trio. Two of those three were well over 40% from deep last year. So if you're going to stick Wiseman with a primarily bench-related group, something like that would be the best way to actually use him in a way that lets James Wiseman be James Wiseman and punish Smalls and make quick decisions and be good in the post when he does that stuff, and also not kill the Pacers, because that group's not going to defend very well, as the Pacers didn't defend well very often last year. The other James Wiseman thought process is, well, okay, let's get rid of the whole bench constraint, right? Because that's just natural. It makes sense. He's going to be behind Myles Turner. Okay. Well, let's say he's not, right? Like a big theme of two-man lineups for the Pacers are, everybody's better with Tyrese Haliburton, right? And so the goal for the Pacers is a couple things. One, it's obviously make their players better, make the lineups make sense. But like figuring out what lineups work with and without Haliburton is important, because the guys who can maintain or run the show without him should be with the bench. Well, Wiseman, as a very much a play finisher and very much a guy who can go up and get passes and create space with his body and speed, is going to be a guy who's better with Haliburton than without. Like, that's not a guess. That's like a fact, basically. And that's been the case for all sorts of bigs. Myles Turner, Isaiah Jackson, Siakam, all sorts of front court players. Toppin could maintain it with the bench, and that's what made sense to move his role around. That's not necessarily the case with everybody. So if Wiseman's going to play with Haliburton, where he's going to be better, what makes the most sense around them? Well, it's kind of similar, right? You need shooting. If you take away McConnell, I would be intrigued by another creator in there. I didn't have one with that bench group, though. So I think if you do Wiseman plus Haliburton, I still like Toppin and the shooting that you could get from that, although Toppin also could be a play finish next to Haliburton, as we saw last year all the time. Ben Shepard again for the shooting and defense, and then Andrew Nembhard, because Haliburton, Toppin, Wiseman, you need defense. And so I put Nembhard in there, but you could go with Neesmith, you could go with Mathurin, you could go all sorts of directions. But I think the theme is clear in whatever way you start this, right? No matter what you put Wiseman with to try to maximize his skills, either a group of primarily bench guys who can play up tempo and can create for him and spread out with some shooting, or a starter group with Tyrese Haliburton that can create good shots all the time, and Wiseman can just jump up high and get it, whatever the group is, it has to fit well, right? You can't, I kind of alluded to this, but you can't trot out Wiseman, Siakam, bad shooter on the wing or mediocre shooter on the wing, and McConnell. You might get enough shot creation to succeed, and McConnell can just isolate on anybody apparently, but that group's going to be too jammed up. It's going to be too clogged for Wiseman to be any good, and then their defense won't be good enough to keep up in general. So they have to be conscious of that. They have to be conscious of that with lots of big men, and they have in the past as well, and that's why shooting is so valuable. So I think with James Wiseman, when you're putting stuff together, that's kind of how I'd be thinking about it, but this is not a full lineup, but I'll be curious how they can actually balance that of having him with the lineups that he should be with, just given how the rotation breaks out, or having him with Tyrese Haliburton, where he should theoretically be at his best, because everybody is, but at the expense of what if you're doing that? Is it Myles Turner time? Is it Siakam Turner front court time? So that'll be up to Wiseman to play in a certain way to show, hey, I belong with this group or that group, and I fit well with these guys. But I'll be very curious how that shakes out. But those are two lineups in particular I think would make sense, and that I would like to see to feature him in the best way possible. Let's pivot to Ben Mathurin stuff, and stuff we didn't get much of last year, because I don't think people realized how unique the timing of the season was after the Pascal Siakam trade and how it relates to Bennedict Mathurin. We'll get to all that in just a second here on Locked On Pacers. Before we dive into that, though, we're going to talk about Gametime, the best place to get tickets for any major event. And they have a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. They filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. It's the best. They have super deals. It's the best way to get tickets for a good price. They have other tiers of deals. You got to check it out yourself on their app, which lets you customize your spot so you can see the view from your seat. You can curate deals to make it easier to find the best price on great seats. You can have the seat view right on there, the low price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection, toggle to on and off if you want the hidden fees so you know all in pricing right at the end. It's the best. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, man, usually it's easy. I just pick the biggest story from the NBA and say, hey, go check that out, listen to this, learn something about that. There's nothing going on. The league is very slow right now. The Pelicans signed Matt Ryan today. That's very confusing to me because they just waived him. There's a lot of cap dorkery going on there. And Jake Madison could have more on Locked On Pels, although I'm not sure how deep he can get into the Matt Ryan weeds. Let's keep going on some lineups here. And I need to break down why I wanted to dive into this coming thing, because I don't think people remember this very well. And everybody knows this happened, but when you really think about it and look in under the hood, you forget until you look how small some of these sample sizes are. So Pascal Siakam, mid-January, boom, he comes to the Pacers. Him and Haliburton play a game together immediately. And that was a big setback for Haliburton. He sits out until early February. And then Haliburton comes back on January 30th, that Celtics game, and they play a month where they have Haliburton playing 20 minutes a game. It's a little less than a month, but whatever. Siakam and Mathurin all playing. And then Mathurin's season ends in early March. And the All-Star breaks in the middle of that. So there was a stretch with no Haliburton. There was a stretch with banged up Haliburton, and then a long stretch of no Mathurin. There's very little actual data of what Mathurin plus Haliburton plus Siakam all together look like. And last year, this was a big topic. What does Mathurin and Haliburton look like? How can they grow together? They have to start together. Let's figure this out. And then it didn't last that long for various reasons, but it still matters, right? If he has the potential, some people talk like he could have, it's going to have to click with the stars to be on the floor all the time. And maybe he isn't the best fitting player with them right now, but perhaps for the Pacers to be the best possible version of this roster they could be, it would involve him becoming that better fit and blending it with the skill set we've seen him have at his absolute best. But like last season, Siakam, Turner, Haliburton, 155 minutes together. That's it. It's like 3 NBA games total. And it's different because it was spread out more than that. But every combination, basically, of any two or one of them without the other two was bigger than that for the time they were all on the floor, right? Like, that's remarkable to me, how small that number is. And I get why. And even in games that they all three played in, the Siakam, Haliburton, no Mathurin line has played more often than the trio together, right? So, like, Siakam, Mathurin together didn't get a lot of time of that, but it had a good net rating in like 80 minutes. Right? A lot of these combos are okay. It's just really tough to parse it all out when there's such little stuff there. So the starting point I wanted to think of was, well, what would be the best thing, right? Make your five where you have those three all in: Mathurin, Haliburton, Siakam. What's the other two players you're going to want? You're going to want defense, and you want shooting. Wow, it sounds a lot like James Wiseman, but really this is for any lineup that has a guy who's offensively gifted. This one has three. You want defense and you want shooting around them. So if you go back and look at the lineups of Siakam, Haliburton, Mathurin, for example, last year, only one grouping played more than 9 minutes with those three players, and it played 104 minutes. So a very significant portion of their time together. And that grouping, the two guard, or the player between Haliburton, Mathurin, and Siakam, was Nembhard, and the center was Turner. So that was the starting five effectively, except Mathurin and Fernie Smith, and that group scored 244 points on 220 possessions. That's a 110.9 offensive rating. That's not that good, right? That's not very good. And that's a small sample. I'm not going to make any conclusions from that, but I was surprised by how low that was. Now, their defense was better-ish, but not awesome, right? So it was still a bad defensive rating, just better than like what the Pacers number typically is. So there's no conclusions to draw because the sample's so small, but it didn't look awesome. It never really clicked. They still were flipping guys in and out. So what is the best possible group around that? To me, Turner's in there. Duh. He can shoot. He can defend or protect the rim. He added pick and roll game last year and some diversity. So no matter who the ball handler is, there can be a screener just for them, Siakam and Turner. And then I want the best size defense I can get, and I'm taking Aaron Nesmith for that if I'm the Pacers, because then I get someone who can guard wings and shoot. I think there are realities where Nembhard fits in there, but that's a lot of ball handling, and Nesmith doesn't need it as much. If you have all of Siakam, Turner, and Haliburton on the floor, or excuse me, Siakam, Mathurin, and Haliburton on the floor. So that's one I want to see. And I kind of a lot is start with Haliburton, Siakam, and Mathurin, and then figure out the next two players. But primarily, I want the fourth and fifth player. Personally, Tony East wants it to be Nesmith and Turner. So that's effectively the starting five with Mathurin and for Nembhard. I don't think that should be the starting five, but I would like to see it a lot because I think that would be good for the Pacers to know. I think it would be good reps for those three players in particular to get together as they try to figure out, okay, how do you do this? How can we do this? We didn't play that much together last year, figuring it out. And just a lot of good gelling, and then figure out what are the two best players around that if it does work. Is it Turner? Is it, a Jackson kind of switchy guy? Is it a Nembhard or a Nesmith? Or is it even a Ben Shepherd who needs the ball even less and is just going to be this crazy effort 3-and-D guy, right? Is it Jarris? Who knows? So I want to see that a lot if I'm the Pacers and if I'm Tony East, because I'm a curious person. So that's like the starting point. But the offense wasn't even that good with that trio last year, but the sample size is too small for me to even take anything of it. And it's so low that it is guaranteed to be better. So the question is just how much. The other question I have of Mathurin, because again, he missed a lot of time, including the postseason, is what does it look like if he plays with Haliburton and no other shot creators, right? So for example, if there's a lineup of Tyrese Haliburton, Ben Mathurin, Ben Shepherd, Obi Toppin, and Isaiah Jackson, how much does that group sing? Does it actually make sense? Because you're not going to get great backcourt defense with what we've seen from Haliburton and Mathurin so far, but they're awesome offensive players. So can those other three guys in there, is that enough to make a group work? And that's not a lot of defense, but it's enough defense maybe, right? Would that actually make sense? Because that would be a formative way to keep going with your bench. Is you can actually take Haliburton out first if you're the Pacers, and then put him in with the second unit like that group and just terrorize guys because you have two awesome ball handlers. That's if Mathurin clicks with him. But that's something I thought about. I also wondered if we do Mathurin and Haliburton without other handlers. Nesmith, Toppin, Wiseman as your front court. So you get some size and shooting and a lot of speed in that group. What does that look like for them as those other two guys try to create as much as they can? Something like that would be intriguing to me if they have Siakam out of the mix. We didn't see that a whole ton last year. Haliburton and Mathurin, no Siakam last year. 554 minutes, -1 net rating. Great offense, awful defense. 123 defensive rating. That's why I keep trying to sneak defensive players into these groupings, because that's what I think makes the most sense. We're going to do all Jarris Walker stuff in the third segment. So I'm going to throw in two fun ones here that are unrelated to Ben Mathurin, but just stuff I typed down. We talk a lot about tiny, small ball, whatever, which is really just skill ball or speed ball, whatever you want to call it. So last year, Siakam, Toppin, Nesmith, Nembhard, and name your point guard was a good group. And so McConnell or Haliburton or whoever, I want to see that, not because I don't know anything about it. I know a lot about it because it's awesome. It worked really well. It was really fun. I want to see more of the tiny ball groups again this year, how they fit in the tiny ball with Turner, with Jackson, with Wiseman on the team and still manage minutes. I'm not sure, but in terms of actual effect and in terms of fun to watchness, I like those tiny groups. The jumbo group, however, I kept clamoring for it. People remember, if you listened a lot in the playoffs, even right before the playoffs, I talked about this being something I wondered about the future of the Pacers and their construction of lineups and their roster. Jumbo, huge, whoa group. They have the skill and shooting to pull this off, right? Myles Turner, a big center. Pascal Siakam, a big four. At the 3, Jarris, a huge player they think can play the wing. And then Aaron Nesmith at the 2, because he can do that. We've seen him guard guards in the postseason. He became that kind of guard. And then Haliburton at the 1, he's tall for his position. That's all 6'5" and up guys. That's enough defense. If Walker becomes anything on the end of the floor, it's enough skill. It's enough shot creation. It's just really interesting to me. And it's just a way to get size on the floor, and particularly skilled size, which is how the NBA is trending. I don't know if it would actually work that well, because with Haliburton and Siakam, you're kind of limiting what Jarris Walker can be offensively, and who knows how that group would click defensively. They have a lot of guys who should be better defenders than they actually are, but also all those guys have had flashes of good defensive moments in their career. So I think that'd be fun. I think the opposite of small ball could actually be a reality that makes sense for the Pacers this season, given their personnel, and I would look forward to seeing it. But I have nothing else to add on the Mathurin front. We got to get to Jarris Walker. What is Jarris Walker? How do we find this out? If I'm Kevin Pritchard, I'm having meetings. What do we need to do to figure out Jarace Walker, his position, how he'll fit on this team, what his skills actually are. There's too many questions. We'll try to answer them here in the third segment. Before we talk all things Jarace Walker, we are going to talk all things FanDuel. You've heard us talk about FanDuel a lot here, and they are America's #1 sports book for a reason. Well, now we have something different for you right now when you're listening through September 22nd, so the end of summer. Every single FanDuel customer can bet $5. Sweet. If you do that, you get 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Wow. Then, with the YouTube-based plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime, but that's NFL Sunday Ticket now through September 22nd. If you go through FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen should be Locked On Bulls. There's news about Lonzo Ball all the time. I can't wait to see him play. Locked On Bulls will have more on that. If you're looking for information, by the way, the Pacers, since I've last done a news thing, have signed 3 players and there's TV agreement stuff. We're going to do a news show later this week, and there's enough of it and enough of it that's significant that it'll just be the whole episode. Is here's a bunch of stuff you should care about and why it happened. So that's why I haven't talked about Dakota Mathias or Kyle Mangus or Cameron McGriff yet. Let's finish up the lineups with some Jarace talk, right? And I think we still don't know what Jarace Walker is, and that's what makes this exercise particularly fun. Right, there was this thinking last year, okay, he could be the 4, maybe he could start there, but maybe he could be the 5. Maybe he's got the body to be a 5. If he can't shoot well enough, he could play the 5, guard some centers. Maybe this past year, as we saw with the Manitou, maybe he could play the wing. Maybe he could be a really huge wing, and he can play on the perimeter, and he can move the ball and shoot it. And this is something and something wing. Is it 3-and-D? Is it neither of those? Who knows? I just talked really fast through all that, but there's still a lot of intrigue about what Jarace Walker is and what the best role for Jarace Walker is. Right now, it seems like the trending direction, given Summer League and given comments, would be on the wing. But I'll never give up on big, bulky guys who are strong playing the 5. So what makes sense for Jarace Walker? What do the Pacers want to know? Do they already know? Do they already have an inkling about what they want this to look like, right? Is there a lineup where he's the 5 that you could actually learn anything? I put down this group for that. Tyrese Haliburton, because if Jarace Walker is going to be a short roll creator, he has to actually set screens and roll. Andrew Nembhard, because he can defend and shoot. Aaron Nesmith, because he can defend and shoot. And Pascal Siakam. That's just the starters with Jarace Walker at the 5, because we know that group has enough offense and defense to survive. Myles Turner thrives with that group, so they should not just pull Myles Turner out for fun. But if you can get Jarace Walker some reps at the 5 with that specific group, that's the best way to learn if he can do it, because all he has to do in that group, all air quotes, is 5-man stuff. Bang with a 5, guard the center, guard pick and rolls when the center sets it, and then move that man around by cutting, by shooting, whatever. Do 5-man stuff. And if it goes well, that'd be fantastic for the Pacers. That would suggest a lot of multi-positional versatility for Jarace Walker. What about a lineup where he's on the wing? All right, that's what it seems like this is trending to. What is that going to look like? Is it when there's an injury to a 4? Is it just they want him to play the 3? And what is the best situation for him as a 3? He's going to be on the perimeter more. How about chances where he has more opportunities to play make? That's what I'd be thinking about. Everyone I've talked to, you've heard on this podcast, right? Hey, Kyle Mangus, what do you see from Jarace Walker? What's going to be good from him? Oh, I think he's such an underrated passer. Myles Turner was on Club 520 with Jeff Teague recently. They asked him about Jarace. He said, oh my gosh, you guys haven't seen it, but Jarace could really pass, right? He can create. Okay, so if he's going to be on the perimeter, he's going to create. He can't be with a bunch of creators. So if Jarace at the 3, what about Nembhard, Shepard, Toppin, and Jackson? That's a bench group. That's basically just the second unit with Jarace in instead of Ben Mathurin. I'm not saying that to say Ben Mathurin should not play. He should play a lot. But that's a group I think would make sense to explore Jarace Walker's studio space on the perimeter. It would allow him to be next to good defenders still and still have the chance to be on the perimeter, create a little bit, because Ben Shepard won't, Obi Toppin won't. He'll be required to alongside Nembhard. So set some screens, throw some passes, weave your way into space. We saw the highlights of him doing that last year. It was just too infrequent to actually say it will be a part of his future as a player. What about just some roles, right, for Jarace Walker? What about a lineup where he's the presumed best defender? Now, he wasn't the defender anybody thought he'd be last year, but what if you stick him between Tyrese Haliburton and Ben Mathurin, and then in the front court, Obi Toppin and James Wiseman? That group's going to score a lot. Can they guard anybody? And can Jarace Walker help them guard anybody? He would have the toughest assignment if that was the group that the Pacers trotted out there. What does he do? How does he look? Can he stay with them? Can he move well? Can he force mistakes? That's going to be required. And that group's going to want to play fast. He's got to help them by getting stops, by being up in someone's face, by doing his thing, right? What does Jarris Walker look like in a lineup where he is presumably the best defender? I'm not saying he is, because last season he wasn't the best defender in any group, but the traits he has suggest that's a possible reality for him. The other thing I'd be curious about with Jarris Walker is if he is with the bench group, and he's next to guys who can create, what does he look like, right? So if Jarris Walker's the 3 and the 4 is Obi Toppin and the 5 is Isaiah Jackson, okay, I guess that's fine. But if Jackson's your roll man and Toppin's your shooter, what's Jarris doing? And then if let's say you have TJ McConnell in there because he's going to be at the bench a lot, well, is he going to have the ball enough to create? You have a lot of creators there. So it's hard to kind of put it all together. And so I'd just be curious in a lineup like that, what does he look like? How does he find little pockets of ways to be a productive player? Is it quick decisions? Is it shooting really well? Is it being an awesome defender between Andrew Nembhard and Obi Toppin? What does that look like for Jarris Walker? What does success look like in a lineup where the way he goes to succeed is not particularly obvious? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to find out. There's a million permutations where he plays the 4 and it looks cool next to Siakam at the 3 or the 5. There's situations where he plays the 4 and looks good in a bench unit next to whoever the center is. There's lots of Jarris Walker intrigue at lots of positions. And you've all heard me say my take. I think he'll play more this year, not because he'll be in the rotation, but because he'll be closer to it. So any injury will get him playing time. But I think there's a lot of lineups I want to see him with. So pretty much as long as he's playing, I will personally be intrigued by who the Pacers have on the floor, how Jarris Walker is playing, how he's doing, and what that all means for the future of the franchise. And that's what a lot of this is all about. Does the young guy Mathurin fit with these guys? Does the star fit with that other guy? And the stars fit with this group? That's what lineups are all about, figuring out those combinations in a way that makes sense. And these are ones today that interest me for that reason. They're either going to solve a combo, or they're going to make the Pacers look awesome, or a new guy is going to fit right in. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. If you have a 5-man unit you think the Pacers should want to see this year, tweet at me at Tony R. East. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, please comment down there. I really like reading those, and people come up with some crazy stuff. It'll be harder this year, though. We've seen a lot of the Pacers groups and lineups last year. They have 13 guys coming back. Tomorrow, Jimmy Cook's going to join us from 107.5 The Fan to do our yearly What Are the Odds? And look back at last year's What Are the Odds. Jimmy smoked me. It wasn't even close. And then as the week progresses, we'll talk more. We got to do the small forward historic recap, best seasons, by someone at that position. And then Friday, we'll get to all the news, right? The news dump, as I'm calling it, all the stuff I think you need to know this summer from a Pacers perspective and the transactions they've made in the last couple of days. Why'd they do that? Who are these guys? Are they going to be the Manics? Are they going to be the Pacers? We'll answer it all later this week. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show and learned something. Again, please let me know about some lineups you want to see, because I'm dying to know. Tomorrow, talking with Jimmy Cook. Till then, everybody have a wonderful day.